Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 113. Quit While You're Ahead. Izuku had found himself with a lot of time on his hands while he was still on orders to take it easy. No patrol meant an additional 4 to 8 hours every night for him to not sleep. He had tried to for the first few nights, but he gave up quickly. Even without the nightmares, he's not sure he was capable of sleeping for more than 4 hours at a time. His body wasn't used to it. He'd come home, do his homework, and pass out for a few hours. Wake up in a cold sweat, gasping for air that seemed to refuse to fill his lungs, contemplate eating dinner, stress out about his sports festival speech, go back to bed, wake up in a cold sweat, rinse, and repeat. He was getting more sleep than he usually did, but it didn't feel like it. He was so tired. He had made little to no progress on his speech by the time he was nearly cleared to participate in heroics again. He hadn't even gotten past the point of what he wanted to talk about, much less actually writing the speech. Eraserhead told him to get it done while he had time and then focus on training. But, well, so much for that. He felt like an arrogant a-hole for not really being all that worried about the actual sports festival, but he had nearly 4 years of intensive training in the field. He had been both All Might and Eraser's personal student for a while now. He didn't think he could feasibly get more prepared than he already was. The speech, however, he was not qualified for that in the slightest. Thinking about his motivations and why he was doing what he was doing required too much introspection for his comfort. But after waking up screaming loud enough to hurt his throat at nearly 5 a.m. one night, he decided that his mental state was unlikely to get much worse, so he might as well try. Why did he want to be a hero? What did being a hero mean to him? Those were the types of questions he should touch on. This speech was his introduction to the world. This could set the tone for his career. He needed to tell the world he was here like All Might wanted him to, and not only that, but why he was here. So, what it meant to be a hero, why he wanted to be a hero, and why he was here. He wanted to be a hero to save people. That was obvious. Ideally, that's why every hero wanted to be a hero. Saying that wasn't going to set him apart. He wanted to be a hero so no one had to go through what he went through. He wanted to save people like him who never had a hero. But he couldn't very well say that. He already had the teachers on his ass. He didn't need them grilling him any more than they already were, so he needed to keep himself out of it. He wanted to be a hero for the hopeless. That was good, right? He didn't have to say he was among the sorry masses left to the wayside by society. What did it mean to be a hero? To him, it meant dedicating yourself to others. It meant stepping in where no one else would. It meant being patient and kind and strong and selfless. It meant standing up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. People like him who, no, this wasn't about him or who he used to be or who he might still be under everything, who he might always be, no matter how far he ran from it. Gah! He was wrong. His mental state could get worse. He couldn't wait to go back on patrol. He was so sick of himself. Jumping from rooftop to rooftop felt like the air finally returned to his shriveling lungs for the first time in weeks. They were going to show up over half an hour early at this rate. They didn't care. If they spent another second in the stupid little office that served more as an echo chamber for their own tormenting thoughts than it did as a shelter, then they were liable to completely lose their mind. Completely losing their mind while standing on top of a tall building was much more preferable. They sat on the ledge and looked out over the city while they waited. It didn't look any different than how they had left it. They had been keeping an ear out as well and hadn't heard any whispers of anything stirring up in their absence. There had to be something, but at least that something wasn't big enough for people to be talking about. They let themselves get lost in their own thoughts as the minutes ticked by. It was a nice night for it, more pleasant than overanalyzing themselves into a downward spiral while it was freezing at the very least. Eraser! They greeted cheerfully as the man in question crested the roof and saved them from their imminent unraveling. You missed me? He shot back sardonically with an eye roll. However, the slight grin on his face betrayed his feigned nonchalance. You're not allowed to die. We've been over this at some point, surely, they half teased. Even though they saw him every day, they hadn't gotten the chance to actually express concern. He had seen the way he got agitated toward the end of first period every day. He knew Eraser wasn't doing well, but there wasn't anything he could do about it. Yes, we have. I was thinking about it, but I ended up deciding that I probably shouldn't. He shot back dryly. No dabbling with death either. Didn't think I needed to be so explicit about the rules. They amended, stage whispering the last bit. Noted, Eraser replied, hiding a grin in his capture scarf. He sat down and they ate their dinners like they always did. They knew that Eraser probably noticed them glancing back at him. He could, at the very least, hear them shuffling, if not sense their gaze on him when they couldn't help it. Their days like this were numbered, and they were going to have to tell him that tonight. For now, they could just let him believe that it was because they were worried about whatever had happened at the USJ. They weren't not worried about that after all, but they were much more worried about losing Ivy and what that would mean for them and Uptown. The spring air was warm against their skin as they jumped from rooftop to rooftop, even as the night progressed. They were doing their best to live in the moment, but it was difficult given how much change was currently hanging over their head. Luckily, things around town didn't seem to have deteriorated too much in their absence. The ladies, however, were not pleased with their disappearing act. Oh, look at what the cat dragged in, one of them remarked as they made their way over to walk them home like they normally did at the end of the night. Now, where the hell have you two been? EY asked, shooting both of them a glare. We thought you were dead. Not just a romantic getaway vacation, Ivy shot back. They didn't even have the chance to laugh at the disgusted and confused faces each of them pulled at that before Eraser smacked him across the back of the head. Ooh, you look like you got your ass kicked. EY ignored Ivy as she studied Eraser's face. I think the getaway might have been to the hospital, Sakura half teased. She still looked rather concerned. We're both fine. It's nothing to worry about, Eraser answered. Nothing to worry about? My ass. You guys have been out for over a week. Now you come back with your face busted? I'm not buying it, Sakura argued with her arms crossed over her chest. The information is highly classified. We've got our fingers in pies you guys have never even heard of, but we showed 'em what for, right, Eraser? They said in the same way they used to when they'd tell the ladies overly embellished stories of their escapades. I bet he tripped down the stairs or something stupid, EY said, rolling her eyes after Eraser didn't respond to their prompting. They shot him a disappointed glare for letting the bit fall flat, but he just rolled his eyes as well. Come on, girls, they aren't going to tell us anything. They're alive and back, so let's just go. The wind is getting cold. EY interrupted the ladies' chatter after sharing a charged look with Eraser. What was that about? She seemed to know more than she was letting on, They shot Eraser another look that said, "What am I missing?" And he returned a look that said, "I'll tell you later." So they let the matter drop for now. The ladies lingered at their respective doorways as they walked them home, but none of them prodded for more information. Izuku was going to miss them too when all was said and done. He couldn't very well hang around with hookers as some random 15-year-old boy. That would probably be frowned upon. He had a few more weeks, though. He'd just have to savor them while he could. What was going on with EY? They asked as soon as they were alone again. I gave her my number in November when you went MIA so she could let me know if she saw you. She texted me last week asking where we were. She wouldn't drop it, so I told her I'd been hospitalized and you were fine. That's all she knows. He replied. They felt a sharp pang of shame in their chest. He had really been worried about them. Got it, they answered awkwardly. We calling it for the night? He asked them. They were grateful for the change in subject, but unfortunately they had an even worse subject to bring up before he left. Yeah, I just needed to talk to you about something before you go. They forced the sentence out of their mouth against their own will. Eraser stilled and eyed them cautiously. He took a moment to look around before nodding his head for them to follow him up the alley wall and onto the rooftops, away from any prying ears. Once they made their way up, he looked back at them with a raised brow. God, they just had to say it and get it over with. I, um, I'm gonna get a license, they started. They saw how Eraser's expression brightened at that. He had clearly been expecting terrible news. That's great, kid, he replied with a rare, genuine smile. The smile didn't last him long, though, because he could see the way their tension hadn't settled. He didn't say anything, but his face told them that he was ready to hear the bad news now. I've been pushing it for nearly 4 years. I can't afford to get caught now that I actually have the chance to. They trailed off. They couldn't say what they really meant. Saying it out loud made it too real. They were living in a delusion and they wanted to stay there as long as they could. Oh, Eraser remarked, seemingly as much at a loss for words as they were. The two of them stood there in painful silence for what felt like eons before Eraser spoke up. How long? He asked. I don't know. I don't want to leave this city. I can't. I I don't know. They sputtered out a little too honestly. A week or so just to tie up some loose ends. Make sure this place doesn't fall apart without me. Eraser just nodded. He looked sad. It was subtle, but it was an expression he so rarely wore, and it twisted their heart painfully. I'll come back, they insisted, trying to lift the mood. When this is all said and done, I'll come back. You can't get rid of me forever. Yeah, only in my dreams, he replied in a voice just a touch heavier than his usual monotone. As the two of them said their awkward goodbyes, something didn't sit right with Shota. He should be glad that the kid was ending Ivy's career like this. It was far better than the alternative. But something niggling at the back of his mind told him that too many similarities were being drawn between Midoriya and Ivy. They were both getting their licenses now. They fought the same way. They looked similar, or at least he thought they did. He's not sure what Ivy really looked like under that disguise, but they acted completely different. Ivy was loud and crass, and Midoriya was timid and painfully polite. And that's not even to mention that Midoriya would have been, what, 12 when Ivy made their debut? That was completely illogical. A 12-year-old would have been dead their first night in these streets doing what Ivy was doing, and moreover, Midoriya's quirk was far too flashy to hide. It was plausible that they were related. It would explain the parallels if Ivy taught him how to fight. It would explain the similar physical appearances as well. Maybe Ivy was inspired to get their license because of Midoriya. Or maybe Shota was looking into this too much. What were the chances that Ivy and Midoriya were related in any way? There had to be some other explanation, surely. He felt certifiably insane for considering that Midoriya could be Ivy, but there were too many coincidences piling up. Either way, he and the entire UA staff were keeping an eye on Midoriya, so he had to trust that they would catch him should he fall. As for Ivy, he had to trust them to take care of himself. He knew he worried about them too much, and Hisashi was right. They had made it this far. They weren't incompetent. He was so lost in his thoughts that he hadn't even realized he was halfway home. As he approached the train station he usually boarded at, he let out a sigh. He hadn't made sure no one was following him. He was going to have to keep an eye out and walk to the next station, wasn't he? That damn kid was such a pain in the ass. End of chapter.